Joe Rogan, basically.
Hey guys, Joel here. I made this video. Thanks for sharing it. Glad to see people are enjoying. Just to clarify, the actual video is titled Comedian Podcast and makes no mention of Joe Rogan. I made it 8 months ago and it was definitely more broadly about comedians having other comedian guests in general. Wish you all the best. Joel, my friend and I watched Forget About Everything for a while the other night while tripping, and we were dying. Amazing stuff. But, my friend is convinced that you and your co-lead are in a relationship in real life. Obviously there's nothing wrong with that if you are, but since I have the opportunity to just ask you directly, I figure, why not? Tabloid media serves emotional narratives that confirm what the audience already believes. Outrage, gossip and titillation are the cornerstones of tabloid media. It avoids challenging the reader's assumptions and will not cover or minimize a narrative that goes against what the audience wants to hear. Many talking heads are lazy, lack intellectual curiosity, uninformed and primarily care about their own egos or making money. The most appealing attribute they have is being your funny parasocial friend. The power of these parasocial relationships is currently underutilized in the sphere of political ideology, but that will change over time as those with interests in furthering a political ideology realize how persuasive they can be. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 10 years you'll be seeing Coke-sponsored Minecraft YouTubers to keep their ideology going. The last show of his I remember watching, he had some investment fund guru on and the first thing they exchanged was, "Joe, can we agree socialism is really bad?" Guest, "Yes, it has never worked or would work." Joe, "So, how did you get so knowledgeable?" Guest, "My mom would drop me off at the public library every morning when she went to work and I'd read the books there all day." No sense of irony or awareness about this. I enjoy select Joe Rogan episodes, specific musicians, the occasional comedian, and I'm an MMA fan so his Fight Companion podcast is up my alley. For those who think Joe Rogan is a dumbass and/or goop for men, you're right. However, 99% of Joe's podcasts, at least the ones I choose to listen to. I don't have time to listen to several 3 hours podcasts a week, aren't political. Most of his guests aren't controversial people. He's had guys like Ben Shapiro and Alex Jones on his show a few times, but he's also had Bernie Sanders, at a time where Bernie was not really being given, in my opinion, adequate spotlight to express goals, etc. My point is this, for those who don't really know anything about Joe Rogan other than a soundbite where he's criticizing mask wearers, he's a dumbass. By the way, Joe is prolific, he's got like way over 1,000 episodes, and has on every kind of guest imaginable. Most of the time, at least on the full, unedited episodes I've listened to, he's not actually discussing PC culture, or anything like that. He's usually just kinda stoned shooting the shit with a pop scientist, or athlete, or musician. The way Reddit portrays Joe is that every 2 seconds he's spreading misinformation about COVID. He absolutely has done this, by the way, whining about PC culture, he's done this too, etc. Personally, my issue with Joe Rogan is that he pretends to be in touch with the common person and he plays the role in his podcast of being a surrogate for the listener. You know, like, these are the types of questions you would ask. I'm just one of the bros. Don't listen to what I think. I'm just a idiot. But in reality, he is literally $100 millionaire living in a $15 million mansion, extremely out of touch with anything that is happening in reality, and has one of the largest and easily influenced audiences that exist in modern media. It seems to me like a dangerous combination for spreading misinformation and false ideas on a massive scale. It's kind of like if Jeff Bezos started a podcast where he pretended to be a blue-collar worker and gave his opinions on political and social issues from that viewpoint. Come on, man. He had Bernie on once. For an hour. He's had Ben on at least 3 times and Alex on 5 or so times. All for 3+ hours. And they're friends and colleagues outside of the podcast. Jones and Rogan go back decades. Not to mention objectively awful guests like Milo Yiannopoulos twice, Dave Rubin, Sargon of Akkad, Stefan Molyneux, the list goes on. Yes, Rogan has had some progressive and left-leaning guests over the years, but the far-right reactionaries far outweigh them in both hash of appearances, length of podcasts, as well as quality of podcast, in the sense that it's overwhelmingly clear that Joe is genuinely interested in talking to the Milos, Shapiros, and Joneses. I've listened to the JRE since its inception and witnessed the steep decline as politics and obsession with cancel culture has crept in since around 2015-2016. Saying, "But he had Bernie on," is such a lame counterpoint. I totally agree, in that I still enjoy his podcast, I just skip the political ones. Comedians like Burr, athletes, sports, fighters, surfers, physicists, astronomers, Steve-O, don't know how to classify this guy, there's a tons of really interesting stuff in there if you ignore the crap. But just don't fall into the trap, not saying you are, but it gets repeated a lot, that he's just giving every side a platform. Open to all viewpoints equally. There is a clear disproportion in guests. For every Bernie and Yang, who are not even extremists, arguably mainstream-ish politicians, that went on once or twice, you have actual awful people like Jones and Shapiro and Milo going on multiple times. For the tons of guests he brings on to exaggerate about BLM being all Antifa terrorists and looters, he hasn't ever brought on a prominent BLM leader or spokesperson. For all the guests he brings on that discredits the trans movement, he never brings on a trans woman to speak in favor of it. The only example I can think of is Eddie Izzard, but that was more because she is a comedian than to talk about trans issues. Joe changed. His podcast used to be a lot better. It started not too long before COVID, but since COVID especially, he's turned into this rich, entitled, elitist, annoying libertarian conspiracy nut. He started believing his own bullshit and whatever he read online. He's become so selfish and pedantic too. I am thankful for some of the guests he's had on over the years introducing me to other podcasts I now enjoy more. Joe hasn't shut the fuck up about lockdown inhibiting his ability to do comedy in a year now. Endlessly selfish and short-sighted. IDK. I started listening to Joe Rogan's podcast during the pandemic. It is not at all what Reddit makes it out to be. I assume most people here have watched a clip or two out of context and never actually listened to a whole podcast. Joe Rogan talks to all kinds of people and gives them a platform to spread their ideas. Joe can't stop recommending UBI, Universal Basic Income, after having Andrew Yang on the show. Sure, Joe Rogan has some right-leaning guests on his show, and a ton of apolitical guests too. Perhaps some of you do need to get out of your echo chambers. But Joe Rogan seems more open-minded than most people. Especially people here. I'm not a Joe Rogan defender, but this doesn't seem to be accurate to the Joe Rogan clips I've seen. Joe Rogan says some dumb things, but he interviews a lot of people with diverse opinions and doesn't seem to be in an echo chamber. This video seems more aimed at other comedian podcasts. The video creator chooses specifically to mention the snowflake college culture issue and the speak to someone with different beliefs issue, but in a way that suggests irony or hypocrisy. Again, I reject the notion that the comedians or other people complaining about the whole cancel culture, snowflake, PC phenomenon are somehow the ones out of touch or not speaking to those of different beliefs. They are keenly aware of those with different beliefs. They also think that largely those beliefs are being misapplied outside of their appropriate contexts to the detriment of comedy specifically and to general discourse as a whole. As soon as Corona hit, it was clear to me that Joe Rogan was gonna fall down yet another conspiracy rabbit hole. He has some sort of underdog complex where he naturally gets attracted to alternative facts because he always questions conventional perspectives, and so he tries to find an angle in alternative narratives to legitimize them while trying to find an angle on conventional narratives to delegitimize them. It takes a lot more convincing to get Joe Rogan on board with conventional wisdoms than it would take to get him on board with conspiracy theories, for example. It's what makes him support a lot of progressive ideas that go against the grain of the status quo, while at the same time feeling connected to alt-right personalities like Ben Shapiro. ITT. People mad that Joe Rogan, someone who supported Bernie Sanders, would dare try to have conversations with people that don't have 100% leftist views on everything. There is a lot of weird hand-waving in this thread trying to make Ben Shapiro, Milo Yiannopoulos, and Alex Jones into conservative voices counter to Bernie or Yang. The problem is they aren't. Alex Jones harasses parents of dead kids and claims the shootings that killed them aren't real. He believes in every conspiracy theory under the sun and makes a lot of them up himself. They all have pretty dubious opinions when it comes to, say, transgender issues or race. He is going all around the country trying to incite rebellion and undermine our democracy. He was a "stop the steal" idiot with a megaphone outside one of the centers counting votes in Arizona, threatening election officials and forcing them to require police escorts just to leave the building. He's not Bernie but with different politics, man, just stop it. Having on Dan Crenshaw, surprisingly not mentioned much in this thread, is more akin to a conservative viewpoint to counter Bernie, Yang, but the problem is Rogan invites the shithead crazies on way more frequently than he invites on legitimate politicians from either side. He used to have actual progressives and actual right-wing people on his show. It used to feel like Joe was learning something and you were too. Then it became that Joe is an announced lefty for the sake of when it services him, but refuses to combat right bullshit ideology when it's directly in front of him for the sake of letting the person talk. That's what made him great. He's a stereotypical dumb man who is also sympathetic to the struggle because he had an average to below average upbringing while also jacked and strong about his opinions. He'll stand for progressive values when they make perfect sense, and he's not going to push around cause he'll literally beat the shit out of you, so you better make sense. And if you don't make sense, then you're just an asshole who doesn't like people just doing their own thing, and you can fuck off with that shit. Once he got wrapped up in the whole woke culture shutdown thing, he saw it as an attack on free speech, and as a comedian his narrow-minded perspective kinda went from there. Everything from that point on was woke equals bad because bad equals no comedy store. He used to be better. I think he's just getting lazy. Anyway, I stopped listening since he went to Spotify because I don't have Spotify, and that's 7 years of listening twice a week sorta summed up. You either die a hero, or live long enough to become the villain. That's what happens with many public figures. First they are the underdogs, then some people discover them. Then they are very much loved by the public. It's the honeymoon phase. However, they become too big and end up mainstream. Then people all of a sudden hate them. Now it's cool to hate them instead of like them. So yeah, pleasing humans is very tricky. Sometimes I feel bad for entertainers, because they do all that performance or whatever they do because they wanted to be liked. Do they hate them because of their fame? Or is fame more likely to change most people, or at least force a change in their message or format? I think it's most the latter. I know for a fact that if I eat my own dog food for long enough I start to think it tastes great and everyone should too. I think it may be natural for us to just get that way when we are surrounded by yes people. Look at K's shoes FFS. Reddit is the one full of fucking snowflakes. So offended by Rogan just cause he doesn't suck on the liberal cock. I'm not right-wing and I never voted for Trump by the way, but yeah, Rogan has his own show and his own opinions and it doesn't bow down to the censors or PC shit, so of course the Reddit hive mind wants to act like literally everything he says has zero validity now because he's made some generalizations about politics and corona. The more posts like this I see, the less I'm convinced these people actually watch Joe Rogan. I used to just kind of hate on him from the outside, then I started watching his podcasts and they're really good. A lot of people assume everyone he invites on is someone he agrees with and wants to just hear his opinion validated about one thing or another. Yes, he has a lot of people he is a fan of on his podcast, because why wouldn't he? But the thing these people are failing to recognize is what a constructive discussion with someone of different views looks like. Everyone so at each other's throats these days, people seem to forget you can disagree with what someone says without arguing with them. Better yet, when someone says something that you don't agree with, ask even more questions before you reply to them. Which is something Joe does often. You need to fully understand where someone is coming from before you can try to change their mind, if that's your goal. And sometimes while they're explaining where they're coming from, your own mind will change. It's crazy. No, Rogan is tapping into what Rush Limbaugh tapped into in the late 80s and early 90s and what Fox News tapped into in the late 90s, a total vacuum for information that doesn't skew left, even though pretty much all mainstream outlets do, but about half of the population doesn't. The left does a good job convincing themselves that anyone who doesn't agree is an ignorant X-east committing an X-ism and that they're the smart ones, anyone who disagrees is dumb, etc., etc. ad nauseum. And pretty much all mainstream media is an institution of that narrative. But once you get outside the realm of Reddit, college students, career social theorists, or people who are now communists because their studiesology degree only got them a job as a barista, a lot of people completely reject the entire left-bent belief system, and therein lies an audience. Is he dumb? Because he's definitely politically varied. He's willing to give a platform to people that are deplatformed for violating against political taboos. Is that dumb? I'm neutral on him, but I totally get his popularity. Reddit will say, racist, probably, and downvote, but nevertheless this is why he's popular, and if you disagree with his viewpoints, going into denial about this won't help further your own viewpoints. Joe's an idiot, but he's a Reddit meme. He's had plenty of different people from plenty of different backgrounds. This video being golded so many times tells me that most people only hear about his podcast verbatim, and haven't actually looked any deeper than what the Reddit opinion is. I think that's actually a problem. Having legitimate experts in their field come on your show, and then bringing on crazies like Alex Jones and other dangerous idiots, gives those crazies legitimacy. It puts them on the same level as experts in science and government, which gives them legitimacy. The fact that Rogan doesn't question the dangerous lies peddled by some of these wackos makes the problem all the worse. I used to listen to Rogan when he was on YouTube, and he sounded pretty reasonable to me, not saying that you can't nitpick issues with him here and there, but overall he's a lot better than a lot of other people. So my question for people posting these anti-Rogan threads, which podcast do you suggest as an alternative to the Joe Rogan experience? I bet whatever you pick, there will be a bunch of people who will find issues with your choice, and they'll discover dumb or politically incorrect statements the people hosting your preferred podcast have made. My issue is that he hosts people who endorse conspiracy theories and extremist ideas and lends these ideas legitimacy by saying, I'm just trying to be open-minded. I don't think it's bad at all that he is willing to explore a huge range of beliefs and ideas, but he doesn't make it clear to the audience when those ideas are extreme and often insane. He helps normalize extremism and acts as an apologist for people who don't need or deserve defending. He's also a conduit in the alt-right pipeline. I don't hate Joe, but I think a lot of people are listening to him without the filter of critical analysis that his content requires. I really don't have any alternative suggestions for podcasts, these are just my personal critiques of Joe Rogan. What's interesting, after reading some of these comments, is that people are more than willing to sit around and bitch about literally a guy just talking to other humans. It isn't your right for them to talk about what you want them to talk about. It's incredibly strange that people have some sort of expectation from just a guy and his just a guest, whoever the fuck it may be. Just listen or don't. Basically any right-wing comedian. The word comedian should be legally protected at this point because people say the stupidest shit and get away with it under the guise of comedy. Take Crowder, the guy is not funny, with his edgy Mexican semi-racist accents, his fraud peddling and bootlicking of Trump, but he gets away with it under the guise of comedy. WTF is up with all the hate on here? The show is obviously an extension of guys hanging out having some beers or smoking in the backyard bullshitting. Conjecture is par for the course, and letting your imagination run a little bit is expected and even encouraged. It's what makes it fun. He doesn't package it as anything other than entertainment. All these condescending remarks reek of desperation to put someone down just to feel a little better about yourselves. Joe Rogan says all the time that he's an idiot and not to get the news from him. I don't agree with Joe on everything, but I respect that he has his own thoughts on things. He's brought on a lot of interesting people and people who are a lot smarter than he is. He's changed his view on a lot of things over the years and has become less of a conspiracy theorist, which is when I got back on board. Joe Rogan says all the time that he's an idiot and not to get the news from him. The "I'm an idiot so don't listen to me" statement is basically the "I'm not racist, but" equivalent. You can't say "I'm not an idiot so don't get news from me," while giving his opinion on news to his viewers. These are contradictory things. If you truly believe you're an idiot and you're wrong, you won't consistently give your take on news. He brought on NDT, and kept saying the moon landings were fake. Bringing on intelligent and left people gives him excuse and cover to then push right-wing bullshit and have on Alex Jones. But when he agrees with Jones and pushes conspiracy theories when NDT is on, that isn't balanced, it's an excuse. Saying he's an idiot is an excuse, and telling people he's balanced or sensible because he uses that excuse makes you either blind or intentionally going along with his excuse to defend him. He's become so much less of a conspiracy theorist that he's been shitting on masks and pushing conspiracy shit all year against COVID. Sure, he's improved a lot. He's going with the times. Some conspiracies get exposed, or become unpopular, or the person who is biggest pushing it gets taken down for one thing or another. Conspiracy nuts always do this, they have a bunch of conspiracies, then they move around them. As one conspiracy loses credibility, they move on to new ones and pretend the old ones were crazy to make them seem more credible. Again, it's an excuse. It's not becoming less of a conspiracy theorist, it's pretending your conspiracies are more likely because you also disagree with the old crazier ones. His guests have ranged from Bernie Sanders, to Ben Shapiro, The Innocence Project, scientists, and I agree that he's a bit of a rube. But who else do you know that has had this range of guests? Seems like the opposite of an echo chamber. Again, he's flawed in many ways, but he also gives his audience a wide range of information, and from many different perspectives. Gotta give him that. Where's the lie though? Are colleges not like this? You can arrange a fake conversation with anyone you don't like and make them sound stupid, but that's irrelevant if your point was, colleges are not the way these people describe them, the whole time. Maybe show some proof instead of acting like a 5-year-old making fun of something you don't like. It's either that or I guess Rogan's been popular for quite some time now and simply is the next thing to make fun of by people who think they're edgy or whatever. I've watched Rogan with friend, comedian guests, which I don't find that great. What I respect about him is he is willing to listen to people and give them a platform beyond a sound bite. Sometimes he has scientists, doctors, and journalists that present some super interesting subjects. The same scientist on a news network will get 60 seconds to explain a complex subject, and the news network doesn't want the real science, they want the wow in 60 seconds. Does Rogan bend his views because of his guests? Yes, but this mimics real life. To me, this is no different than being at a dinner party and someone having a different view than you. You smile, try to find common ground, and you let them explain. It is only shock news and today's political debates that become insane and ideological before someone speaks. The podcasts that aren't afraid to be goofs are the ones to focus on. Just for entertainment and maybe internet, Hollywood ongoings, but never for take it as fact information. Well, except for that time Whitney Cummings had an actual doctor on her Good For You podcast, lol. Anyway, I like H3 podcast productions because they actually interact with people outside their echo chamber or the people they goof on. Joe is kinda okay, not a go-to for podcasting emo. I don't really think he's meant for my demographic. Maybe meant for my parents' demographic. IDK. Rogan had Adam Curry on back in March, and Curry explained his podcast system of getting himself and his partner, John C. Dvorak, paid. It's all based on their value for value model, in which they only rely on donations. So basically they aren't worried about any networks or advertisers freaking out if they day something to piss off some corporation cause they don't answer to ad agencies or corporations. Rogan, on the other hand, is beholden to ad agencies and sponsors. I wouldn't say he ever really worries about pissing them off though, because he just lays low and lets his guests say what they want. That's just his style as an interviewer, and it's, arguably, a good style. Yeah, maybe I will speak to someone on the other side of the aisle from me, see if I learn anything. Them. The Jews are secret lizards that control society by making all the rich blacks into pedophiles. The earth is flat and science isn't real. Trump is an infallible gift from God and the election was rigged. I of course don't have any evidence of any of this, but that's because the gays are hiding it. Me. Today I learned something. I learned that I shouldn't talk to these people. I like how Rogan but it don't like Joe Rogan if that makes sense. There are certain podcasts of his that are absolutely brilliant and interesting, funny. I absolutely love the Joey Diaz ones. I somewhat enjoyed Elon Musk one. I thoroughly enjoyed the Rich Benoit one. Also a few of his ones with Bill Burr are great. I think I've only listened to about 3 full ones since Rona started, but basically his best episodes are the ones where he just shuts the fuck up and lets the guest talk. Dude has 1700 plus podcasts. A lot are shit emo, but there are a fair few gems thrown in there. To be fair, I think this describes their younger, male non-casual fans a bit more than them, but it's fun enough melding of him, Delia and Burr. Some of these guys were in Opie and Anthony's radius, back when they did an amazing job promoting Northeastern stand-up, and seem to have inherited a lot of their energy and outlook. Also, there are a crapton of male comedian podcasters or serial guests that are a little more liberal and woman-friendly, but can still come on these shows and relate to the intended targets. Woman comedians tend to tie their podcasts to some separate subject matter like dating advice, true crime or movie, TV recaps.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video. And if you are new, subscribe and click on the bell icon.